Rapp, and I live in Cotuit and have lived in Cotuit since about 1931. We came to Cotuit from near Boston during the crash or the Depression and the start of it. And my folks had they were familiar with this area because they had summered over in Monument Beach. A lot of people from south of Boston used to come down to the Cape on the train to Monument Beach. And so my father and mother finally knew the Cape and among other places, visited Cotuit. And this was after the 1929 crash, where everybody was struggling at that time. So we lived in Waltham, but my father decided to move to the Cape, and so we came to the Cape and bought our house in Cotuit, where I live now. Well, they're all pretty fond now at this age. I had a happy childhood. I grew up with the kids in town. We played in town. Cotuit was a busy village at that time, business-wise. In Cotuit itself, now downtown Cotuit, there's just the Kettle Hoe, which is a little restaurant, and post office. Well, when I was a kid, it was busy there. There was, well, you go down one side of the street, there was a little pool hall, and there was a gas station. And then on the other side of the street, there was a barber shop, a variety store, a butcher shop, a big grocery store, 2 variety stores, a sort of a shoe shop, a shoe store. So downtown Cotuit was a busy place at that time. And that was in the early 30s. One of the exciting things for a kid was to see a policeman come into Cotuit on a motorcycle. Wow, that was big for us. We'd crowd around that motorcycle and he would be proud and showing it to us, you know. But that was the extent of the police coverage in Cotuit that I knew of. Fortunately, there weren't too many police around because the kids at that time used to have pretty free reign of the village, in the wintertime especially. And we used to visit a lot of the summer homes during the winter. We'd go all through them. And we wouldn't break anything or take anything. We'd just go there, just for something to do. So we were familiar with a lot of the big old houses of Cotuit at that time. So there was one post office, of course, and 2 deliveries in downtown Cotuit. And they were big doings because in the evening, when the second delivery could come in from West Barnstable, they'd bring it over, and at 7 o'clock, and the mail would get sorted, and the window would go up about 7:30. Well, everybody around town would be there, meeting there. All the kids would be there. You'd find a gal there or whatever, and that was big happenings. Well, certainly we didn't have anything, hardly, you know. But we didn't starve. We got along, and I know my father, who was a salesman before the Depression, was a salesman after. And he sold oysters from the oyster houses, the oyster company here in Cotuit. He used to go to New York, sell the oysters there in Boston. So that was what he did. And then later on during the Depression, well, I worked when I was a little kid. I was mowing lawns, or finally I got a job in one of the grocery stores. And let's see, I was 13 when the '38 hurricane struck, and I was working at the store. The hurricane came in, we were still open. We didn't know much about it coming or anything like that. And we just happened to notice that the tide was coming in and the water was coming in and the wind was going high and occasionally a tree would go down. There was one fellow who worked with us who was living in East Falmouth. We had to take him home. And Herb Long was the owner of the store. We were supposed to take him home after work. So we got in this Herb car and started to take him to Falmouth. Well, 2 or 3 times we had to go off the road because there would be a tree across. So that was, and when we got back to Cotuit, I went down to the dock and there was water, I guess almost up to my waist in the parking lot. And a lot of the beach houses, a lot of the big homes had sort of bathhouses on the beaches. Well, they disappeared. They were cleaned out and gone. And some of the boats that were supposed to be in the harbor were now on shore. But it was exciting for me. Here, I was a kid and I didn't have a boat, that's for sure. That was the extent of my exposure to this '38 hurricane. Wow. In the town itself, I'd hate to get into politics because my daughter is in it, and I think I'll let her handle that story more than me. I know that the strength of the Cape in Cotuit is the fact that it is a stable, delightful village. It's not as busy business-wise as it used to be, but it's certainly a lovely place to stay for the kids. The water is fair and warm. The areas are sheltered for small boats, so that is certainly a strength in Cotuit, which is probably reflected throughout the Cape. In Cotuit, well, I think my favorite place would be my home, actually, you know, which would be pretty natural. I spent a lot of time there, and especially since now that I'm retired. But yeah, I would have to say my home. I'm still in sports. I still play a lot of golf and stuff, but that's not done in Cotuit. Although, you know, in the old days, there used to be 2 golf courses in Cotuit, a regular 9-hole golf course in Santuit. I caddied there when I was a kid. And the golf course at Cotuit High Grounds, which is still operating. It's a nice, short, executive-type course, well kept by the Hares, and a lot of action up there. Well, I'll go back to when they weren't the Kettleers. I'll go back to when I was a kid. There was a Twilight League in this area, and there were local teams in not only Cotuit, there were teams in Osterville, Hyannis, Mashpee, Falmouth, Sandwich, and probably others. And they played at the same ball field in Cotuit where they play now. The Kettleers, beautiful, beautiful Lowell's Park there, as you know. And but I saw every game when I was a kid at that ballpark. And of course, it was a source of revenue for us, all the foul balls that we could find. We'd get a nickel apiece, you know, if we returned them. So that was a big thing for us. But, and now I try to go to at least one or two a year now. I remember one night, I was in general practice in Cotuit, and I got a call from Arnold. He said, "God, you better come down here. So-and-so is here. I'm afraid he's bleeding to death, or something. He's been in a car wreck." So I grabbed my bag and I went down. And here, I'm not going to tell you his name, because he's still around. But there he was. He was mud all over his face that was red mud all over his face, and his clothes were soaked. But he was alive, and so I said, "Well, maybe we better find out where that blood's coming from." So we gradually cleaned him off, and we finally got down to a scalp cut about 3 inches long on his scalp, and he had bled from that, and it just covered him. He'd gone off the road on the Mid-Cape Highway, I guess, and it had some kind of wreck. Well, he didn't want to get picked up in the head again. He walked from there to Arnold's, and Arnold he's a friend to everybody. And so I went, I saw him, and we finally got down to the source of this blood, and we fixed it up and sewed him up. So Arnold is a great guy, still around, and hopefully will continue. I can tell you a little bit of my experiences, but I want to tell you a story first about some characters in Cotuit. We were speaking of characters. We had a few, as every village has, I guess, or did. And the names are fascinating. One was a fellow named Blind Chet, and his last name was Nickerson, I think. And he was a shell fisherman. And he would walk down, he lived in high ground, which is just south of the center. He would walk to the center of the town, down to the dock, to his skiff, and he would scull out to an area that he was familiar with. And this is a guy who's blind. And he'd get his quahogs or his oyster, yes, quahog mainly. And so he was Blind Chet and oystering. We had another one, the barber, Charlie Fred was his name. Charlie Fred Fuller was his last name. He was deaf as a post, and he had an attention tremor. Well, you know, he'd cut your hair like this, but he'd also shave people. Well, he used to shed straight razor, and he'd come up to that person and his hands would be shaking, but he'd get on there, and then the tremor would disappear when that blade was coming down, and then he'd start it again. And, God, let's see, Charlie Fred, and then there was a fellow, Foster Nickerson. Foster was a cerebral palsy victim, but he got around, and he had a cart that he could pedal, and when he went up the hill, he'd have a hand assist, and the kids would push him up the hill too. But he couldn't speak clearly, and when he did speak, it was very difficult to understand. You can imagine. So the story goes that they were sort of gathered downtown, as they did during the day. They'd hang around downtown, and the story goes that this woman drove into town with a chauffeur. Drove down the hill and stopped, and she instructed the chauffeur to find the directions to the Pines Hotel, which is a big hotel at that time. So the chauffeur asked one of the guys that was standing there, "Could you tell us how to get to the Pines Hotel?" Well, he asked Charlie Fred. Well, Charlie was deaf as a post, and just sort of looked at him and didn't say a word. So then the next fellow, he turned, "Can you tell us how to get to the Pines?" Well, he said, "Which way are you heading?" That was blind. That was blind Chet. And he didn't know. He heard the words, but he didn't know whether the car was going that way or the car was going this way. So, which way are you heading? And so he turned to Foster and asked him. Well, Foster tried to tell him, but he was. She finally said, "Will you please get us out of here?" So away they went. But anyway, those are three of the classics down in the village of Cotuit. Well, only because I've loved it here, and my children love it here. Certainly the weather is good, except for this year. Business has been good for my children. Here, one is not here. William is in Florida at the moment in computers, but Stuart is here as a lawyer, as you know, and one of my daughters teaches, and Jessie is, she's great. She's here and sitting up there now. It's great.
And they all make you proud.
Oh, absolutely, God, they are great. My wife too, especially. And Rosemary has been my savior. Yeah, I'm Keith Rapp, and from Cotuit, and proud of it.